All right, so let's kind of just jump right into it. So last week where we left off, is this coming up? Good. Is we left off on the, so who remembers what we went over last week? Sounds really morbid.
What did we go over last week?
Now I know.
Say it.
Come on, Evan. What was it?
A suicide statement?
That's right. Sounds terrible, right? It's a statement, though. We're not talking about people committing suicide. We're talking about statements committing suicide. And so who remembers what a suicide statement is?
Go ahead.
Basically one that when you say it, it just kind of refutes itself.
Yes.
Like it can't stand in its own words.
Right.
Like, well, there is no truth. There is no absolute truth.
Right.
Okay, well, is that statement absolute then, or are you like?
Is it true?
Yeah, is that true?
Right.
How do you support that?
Right. So, and then we went through a bunch of like silly examples of it last week too. So, what was it? What was one of them? I can't speak a word in English. Right. Well, you just said a bunch of words in English. Like so it's just they can't meet it's a premise that can't meet its own requirements, basically.
This page is intentionally left blank.
That's the
That was my favorite
yeah.
one.
So they're fun little. They're almost like puzzles, and I think that's kind of why I like picking apart these self-destructive statements. And so the one we left off on last week, which was one that took some unpacking because we have to know what's actually packed into this statement, was all religions are equally true. Right, and so it doesn't look like it's self-destructive on its face, but when you take out what's really saying, so Christianity says that all other religions are false, right? Because they don't accept that Jesus was the Messiah. And so if you're a Christian, then if you believe all other religions are false, then that can't work, because what you're saying is that Christianity is true, but Christianity is not true at the same time. You're saying that all religions are equally true, which means that Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism are true, which Christianity says they're not true. But then you're also saying that Christianity is true, which says that they're false. So what we're always looking for with contradictory statements is, are you saying one thing and its opposite at the same time? So are you saying that Christianity is true and Christianity is not true at the same time? Which you are in this statement, because you're saying that all the other religions are true, but you're also saying that Christianity is true, which says that they're false. So that one took a little bit of unpacking. Anyone want to take a stab at this third one down? You can only know what has been proven by science. This one also just takes a little bit of unpacking. It's not as obvious on its face.
There are things we know that aren't proven by science that we know based on our own observation and senses, such as the existence of, I don't know, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, like I exist, you don't have to prove that
Right.
scientifically every time I begin my own statement.
Right. That would be a pretty hard thing to prove scientifically, wouldn't it? That you exist.
That I exist.
Right. Now you could take your pulse or your heart rate, and you can show that you're like a living being. But how do you show that you're not just a figment of someone's imagination somewhere? Right. That's it's not something that can actually be proven by science. What's funny though about this statement is that can you prove that statement through science? Right. That you can only know what's been proven by science. Is that something that you can prove through science?
Through the scientific method, no.
Right. Yeah. And so basically what you would kind of do with this is for whoever's saying this, you would ask, well, is that a fact? Right? Is what you're saying that you can only know what's been proven by science a scientific fact? And they might say yes. They might, if they haven't really thought through this all that well, they might say yes. And then you're going to ask them, okay, what's the evidential support for that? What is the empirical evidence that you can only know what's been proven by science? And they're not going to know what to say to that, because it hasn't been proven. This is a belief, right? This is not a scientific fact. This is just a belief called scientism. And so that's kind of how you would go with that. But you could also do what Carolyn did, and you could actually bring up examples of things. The taste of an orange, right? Does science really prove that to you? When you say you know what an orange tastes like, is that a scientifically proven fact, or there's certain things in this world that are not proven by science. But what this is claiming is that everything that can be ever known can only be done through science.
But
And
could
so-
you also go to the fact that science is ever changing? So if they find something new, it could negate something else. And
So-
then it's no longer
It's no longer true.
So science changes.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you proved it with science today, it doesn't make it a fact.
Tomorrow.
Like they used to leech people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or like the planets. I don't know. I can't even keep.
Oh, like
track of it.
Pluto and how
Yeah,
it's no
like
longer a
comes home
planet.
from school. Pluto's not a planet. I'm like,
Right. Oh,
it
no.
is.
Yeah. I still
And it
assert that
wasn't,
Pluto's a
and now it
planet.
is
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Something-
Did it come back?
There
Are they
was
trying?
one of them, and I forget. I lose track of it.
Okay. Yeah. But that's
Bye.
another.
Even going back before that, when they thought that the Earth was the center and everything
Rotated around.
Right.
revolved around.
Just because they proved that, or they thought they proved it at that time,
Right, it was
with what they
accepted as
had.
that way.
and it
Yeah.
was the truth at that time, but now it's not because
Right.
they have additional facts.
And what they might do at that is they might say something like, well, it just shows you that we don't actually know that much, right? Or that they might take another one like number 4 there. There is no truth. We can't actually know anything, right? They might go down that road. Who knows? But with suicide statements, kind of what last week we were doing was we were always, the way that you kind of pick them out, right? Which is we kind of did with all religions are equally true, is what is it that they're saying is the case and is not the case at the same time? And so with this number 3, they seem to be saying that you can only know it's been proven by science, but what I just said wasn't proven by science, so not everything that is known can be proven by science, right? And that's always what we want to try to be, aware of when people are making these kinds of statements. Ryan already did number 4, so we can just skip over that. So, all right, so now these ones are going to be a little bit tougher. So who wants to try? So we're going to try to see if we can formulate a Columbo number 3, which is a question that makes a point, right? With each one of these. So we're not going to necessarily break it down like we've been doing, where we kind of, show the, illogic of it. We're going to see if we can use a question to show the illogic of it. And the reason why we're doing that, the importance of questions in these kinds of discussions is that the burden of proof is not on us as long as we're asking questions. And so if we can make a point by using a question, we don't actually have to prove our case at all. We can just make it with questions, which is there's a certain elegance to that. So let's try it. With the world is an illusion and we're part of the illusion. Who wants to take a stab at that? And Evan, if you want to chime in, come on, you can sit up with Mom so you can read them too. So, and you can try to take a stab at it too.
Can you see them from back there?
See if you can think of A is the case and A is not the case. How is their premise saying the opposite of what its premise is saying?
Can you see the illusion if you're part of it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're part of the illusion, how do you know it's an illusion? Like if you're in the illusion,
I've seen a
if
lot of movies
you're
where that doesn't work.
part of the magic trick,
Right,
if you're part of the magic trick, how do you know you're part of the magic trick?
right. Can Mario know he's a video game? Basically.
I mean, that's kind of what, like,
If you are
in any story, if there's an alternative reality, nobody knows they're in the alternative reality.
Right. I think it
Let's
comes
ask
down.
a question though. Still didn't get there yet.
Well, right, you actually did. So, because you kind of said, if you're part of the illusion, how would you know?
how would you know you're in it?
Oh, right.
Because
And-
I've heard this before too, where people think that this is all like
We're in the
like
Matrix.
Yeah, it's like somebody's dream or somebody's I don't know, construct. It's a big word that they use.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, yeah, but how would you even know? Like we are a part of it. And there's like I can really feel there's a table here and there's a Bible here and there's a chair here and Evan's sleeping over there. But like, how do you? There's no way to prove anything otherwise.
Right.
It's kind of like we talked about earlier. Like, I don't have to. Every time I say I don't have to prove to you that I am Ryan Kennedy. I am a person. I'm a human being. I'm a man. I don't have to prove to you all those things every single time.
Right.
Like you can just recognize that, okay, this is a singular sovereign person, like there they are.
Right.
And you have all of those things already there.
Right.
So
Yeah, if we had to go around proving that we weren't illusions all the time,
just stop.
life would stop
You
pretty
wouldn't
much.
even want to have
Yeah.
conversations anymore.
Yeah.
Right. It would be like, what? And maybe that's where people are at. It's like, what's the point of anything then? So I can just give up and play my video games. And be my own
I can, yeah, right. I can be an illusion within the illusion.
Right. That's like, and maybe that's part of what's going on here.
Yeah, so I think when you look at what an illusion actually is an illusion true or not? Is it an accurate representation of something, or is it a false representation of something? It's false. Illusions by definition are false. They're not real, right? And so if he's saying that we're part of the illusion, but he's also claiming to tell you a true thing, that doesn't really make sense, because he's a false thing, and how can anything true come from something false? You kind of see where that's saying. So he's saying that we're all part of an illusion, but I must somehow not be part of the illusion because I'm telling you a true thing. And so that's kind of A is the case, A is not the case. And and I think that what Ryan said with how can an illusion essentially tell me something true? That's kind of the Columba number 3. So that was good. You guys pretty much got that one. So I had to sit down and really think about that. So yeah, that's tough. All right, so God doesn't take sides, and if you don't get it, don't worry about it. I'm not that good at this either, so I just read the book, So
So you're gonna have to phrase that in a question.
or even you can just break it down in your head and see if you could at the end of it get to the question.
So, I don't know, how is it that God is the maker of humanity and he is what instills or creates humanity with good and evil?
Are you doing number 2, or the God doesn't take sides?
God doesn't take sides.
Okay, good. I'm just making sure.
Sorry, I didn't. It's very similar.
Oh.
So I feel like sides are
Right.
typically good versus evil.
Sure. Okay. Yep.
So that if God is the creator of sort of the line that determines the difference between good and evil, and he is the goodness,
right.
he's taking a side.
See, I think about
So
Is that maybe?
So yeah, because I guess what you're saying are you really saying that God is taking evil side? Is that what you're saying?
Right,
If
right.
he's on both sides of evil and
I
good?
just couldn't think of how.
because he can't exist on that side.
Right.
Right. That's an interesting one. I
That's
like
the
that.
absence of God.
Right.
Pretty much.
Right.
So, if God doesn't see, I thought about it more like if God doesn't take sides, if God's incapable of taking sides, meaning like the dispute that we're having or whatever, we are defining the sides. So like God can't be part of something that I'm defining. That's not quite right.
I'm not sure I follow entirely.
I get what you're saying. So what?
Help
If,
me.
so you're
Help me.
saying so we're creating sides, but God sees a bigger picture. So therefore, God doesn't necessarily.
Are you saying so? There's really no sides? Is
There's
that
no sides.
okay?
We have a very limited vision,
Right.
Okay.
of what is here and now.
So wait. So are you arguing for their case, or like, what? What?
Well,
That's true. I guess that's.
I agree. God doesn't really take sides.
I'd say, have you ever read the Old Testament?
Where God's clearly, like Caroline was saying,
Judgment.
yeah.
God clearly takes the Israelites' plight into consideration and chooses the Israelites as his holy people
Right.
and wipes out the rest.
Right.
Like when they go into the promised land and they capture Jericho, God says, wipe them out.
Yep.
He doesn't say, well, okay, these 2 leaders here, they're the bad guys. No. He says, wipe the whole people out. They have all sinned, and like that's part of God's judgment on that whatever culture was there.
Right.
So like, I mean, he very clearly, And if you want to go into the next one, I feel like that's another.
Yeah,
That's like the next step.
Right.
In the same conversation.
But how do you get your this is true but this can't be true?
That was what I was going to ask.
I can't do it. My
It's
brain
kind
doesn't
of,
do it.
and so they're so funny because like you see it once. It's kind of like those illusions. Like you ever like watch those like picture books and you can't see the illusion at first, and then once you see it,
I feel like this is like
this
a mind trick.
it feels like a mind trick.
This one.
Okay, what if I were to ask, does God agree with you? To this question.
Then I have to say God took my side or he didn't.
Right. So if you say God, so Carolyn, say God doesn't take sides to me.
God doesn't take sides.
Does God agree with you?
Oh no. I can't answer that question.
Right. Because if you did, then he took a side. So God does take sides.
Oh, okay.
So
So we just went like way in there.
yeah, which is cool. That's fine. I think you made some interesting
Jumped
points.
into the pit on that one.
Yeah, sometimes these are simpler than they appear to be.
Okay,
All right.
let's try again.
Bottom one is a little bit. We got to do some uncovering though. So God doesn't exist because there is so much evil in the world.
Well, I feel like we've done this one before though.
All right, so we did. We've, but I don't think we've ever framed it in a Columbo number 3. So where we ask a question to make a point about the problem of evil. So what are the two? What's the premise? Well, I think that's easier for us. What is the premise of this statement?
That because evil exists, because there is so much evil that we see every day, all this bad stuff going on.
Right.
How can God even care? I think it's more like how can there be a good God and allow all of this evil? I think
Right.
that's where that sentiment comes from.
Yeah.
Right.
Is how do you justify that?
So the
Right.
the statement then is like God doesn't exist.
But then
Because
then
of
Evil.
evil.
because
Good.
of the evil.
Now, how and this just see if you can find out. So what would the opposite of that be?
God does exist.
Because
Despite
there's
the
no
evil.
evil.
Despite the evil,
Oh,
right?
despite
Or
the evil.
or I think the way that I put it actually, and I'm not actually I won't let the cat out of the bag yet. Okay, so God does exist despite the evil. Now, is there a way that they are also asserting that?
The word evil.
Yes, because
Run with that.
So I don't know. I gotta think about it.
All right, Carolyn, what were you about to say?
well, see, I thought like if they're denying God's existence, they're still talking about him as he does exist.
Okay, that's right. It is kind of an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? How they're so vociferous against a thing that they consider to be
you don't-
non-existent.
Right. Right. Like here you are telling me this thing doesn't exist, but you're working very hard to defend the fact that he doesn't exist.
Right. I like that. So, the evil thing, though. What?
You have to go back to that.
All
I
right.
think you have to go back a little bit and say,
Okay.
how do you define that word evil?
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I think you have to do that before you can do the next part.
right. So, all right. So then all right, I'll be the atheist. All right. You asked me what is evil? Evil is just bad things.
Bad things meaning the absence of good things?
Right. Yeah.
So how do you have something bad if you don't have something if you don't know what good is?
Oh, well, I know. It's good is like, it's just not torture. When you don't torture people, you're nice to people, those kinds of things.
Well, where do you think that came from?
Where does your definition of good come from? Right?
Things that don't hurt people.
And who decides what doesn't hurt people?
This is where that eventually funnels down to, right? Is that there's really no answer at the bottom of that. You can't.
You have to have something at the core. So
Right.
It has to be
That defines
something.
the
If you're going down the road of, because you've defined evil,
Right.
and so there has to be some kind of definition of good. And where's that core? Where do we as humans get our sense of good and evil from?
Right.
How do we say, well, I don't mind if you murder me, like that's okay. But I'm gonna murder you.
Right.
You might not like it.
Right.
So I don't really care because I don't mind if you do that to me.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
people be
it just,
like,
yeah.
you can't even think that.
Right.
You know? So there's something at the core.
Right. And so the question is, do you get evil without God? Does evil exist without God?
No,
Because why?
because there has to be a creator that
'Cause-
defines the difference between good and evil.
Right. Right. If you walk God out the door, you also walk evil out the door. And so when they're saying this, they're assuming God exists. Right. So the A is the case question. The premise is that God doesn't exist because of evil. The A is not the case, is God has to exist because I said that there's evil. Right? And so that's where it becomes contradictory. And so the simple question would then be, how do you, like Ryan, or I think a number of you said it throughout this time, is how do you get evil without God? You know, how do you get an objective sense of morality?
I don't think I will ever be able to think fast enough to have these conversations.
No, I was
in
gonna
real
If you
life.
practice it enough times, you might.
We're going to have to spend the next 10 years of my life doing this then, Mike.
Wow. At least,
It's only a couple weeks.
I can look
yeah.
up later.
What's
Like,
that?
I cannot sit in a conversation and like just say things that actually
But
make
I
sense.
do like practicing it out loud.
Yeah,
Because I don't mind making a fool of myself here.
Right.
It's okay.
But it's usually later. I'm like, oh, I know how to answer that now.
And sometimes it might be
After the
written.
conversation.
What's that?
I said usually it's after the conversation. I'm like, oh, I have a good.
That's happened to me a lot of times, and that's just how it goes, right? That even the best debaters, honestly, have debates where they didn't do so hot. So it's just a matter of getting used to this is all it is, and just having fun in the process. I mean, it's kind of fun to just kind of pick apart these statements because they're nonsense. So all right. So let's see if we can do the top one. So this one's maybe a little easier than some of the last ones. Missy, do you guys want to try? Nope, not gonna take a shot at it. All right.
It's wrong for anybody. It's wrong to condemn anybody for anything.
Mhm.
In that statement, you are making a definite statement of telling me that I can't do that. Which
Right.
is condemning me for making that statement.
So what would be a good Columba number 3 type question? So to show how that's silly.
So are you condemning me for my beliefs? Kind of.
Yeah. Then why are you condemning me? Basically, right?
Yeah. You're doing what you're telling me not to do right now.
Yep.
That sentence.
Yep. All right. This one's a little harder. The Bible, good. The Bible could not have been inspired by God because men wrote it and men make mistakes. So really try to think of the premise and seeing if there's a way that it undercuts its own premise.
It has to do, I think, with the word inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think it's because of the word God and mistakes in there. Because if it's inspired by God and God is perfect.
Okay.
Oh, the men are the ones making the mistakes.
Right.
Okay. So what's the premise?
Men make mistakes.
And because of that,
The Bible has mistakes.
right, and therefore,
It was not inspired by God.
good. Okay, so men make mistakes. They wrote the Bible. It's not inspired by God. Okay. How is that not? Is there a way that this question or this statement kind of undercuts that in some way? That's always the hard part. Focus on the men writing it and making mistakes.
The mistakes don't belong to God. The mistakes belong to the people.
They do. What would that have to mean about this statement?
Could the man that's making that statement make a mistake in his statement?
That's the puzzle, right?
Yeah. So do you think you may be making the mistake saying that it's not inspired by God?
Right.
I mean, it's possible. I'm just saying. It's possible.
Well, because
men make mistakes. Are you one of them right now?
that's a good Columba number 3, right? That's it. I think that's the using the question to make a point.
I never would have got that.
Yeah, that was great.
That's just a simple. So you want them? That's making a mistake.
Yeah.
Right now.
Right. That's a really succinct way of putting that. That's great.
Well, don't ever expect it to happen.
That's funny. So the premise is that men always make mistakes, and therefore the Bible cannot be inspired by God. The opposite of that is that men don't always make mistakes, because I'm saying apparently a thing that's not a mistake, and therefore it's self-destructive. It's also circular though too, because they're saying that because men wrote the Bible could not be inspired by God. And we know that it's not inspired by God because men wrote it, and so it goes round and round in circles, which, of course, no Christian says that the Bible wasn't written by men, right? Or at least, if you know that Isaiah was written by Isaiah, you know that, Matthew wrote Matthew, all that. So the question isn't, did God write it? The question is, did God breathe his inspiration into it? Is it God breathed, right? And so the assumption is that that's impossible, but that's not even part of the equation in this, that God couldn't breathe it into the writing of men and actually suspend, a man's ability from making mistakes while he's writing the Bible, right?
And as men that make mistakes, how do you know there's a mistake in the Bible?
Yeah, and we did that a little bit in the last court. Remember how there was where Jesus was talking about the mustard seed being the smallest of all seeds. Remember that?
Yep. And the bird.
The birds, right? Where they called bats birds or something like that, which they're not really mistakes. They're
translation.
Yeah, right. Because back then it was flying things that were birds, right? And so which bats would fall under. When Jesus was saying that the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds, he's speaking proverbially. He's not saying that it is scientifically the smallest of all seeds. Right. Okay. God used Darwinian evolution to design the world.
Well, first of all, you have evolution and design. Because evolution doesn't design, it just happens spontaneously. There's no design in that. So
Good.
How is God going to use something that's random and spontaneous to design things?
Good. That's it. Yeah, that hits the nail on the head with that one. That's a good use of Columba number 3 with that. Because design means purpose, right? It means that there's a goal. The whole point of Darwinian evolution is that there is no purpose, right? And it's not designed in any way. And so how can God use a purposeless process to purposefully create something, right? So
I love the picture where
I do really like the
went from
picture.
monkeys to robots.
Yeah.
That's weird though. I keep hearing stuff about
AI.
Yes,
I know.
I know people are like, I want my brain attached to the internet, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Did you just see Apple just came out with a $4,000, what are they called? Virtual reality glasses.
yeah.
That's
How much money is this?
$4,000.
For a person to buy, or?
I don't
And-
know what
that
you
much,
would
but I've
do
seen
with
them.
them.
They're big, almost like ski goggles.
Really? Is this so that you can almost is it, I guess, just a very accurate rendering of
So
outside the outside
yes,
world?
the idea was you were supposed to when you work remotely,
Yeah.
that you didn't have to go to the office at all anymore.
You could just
you could just put on virtual reality glasses, and instead of seeing people on the screen, you could see their bodies and
that's surreal.
interact with them, and but I
Wow.
don't think it was a big hit.
Yeah.
I don't know
It
anything
wasn't.
about that.
Well, I mean, the $4,000 price tag probably had some.
Well, there are less
Yeah.
expensive ones. That was just
Are there?
Apple's that
Okay.
just came out.
Yeah.
But you could sit here at this desk and we could talk and have a conversation, and then I could pull in you could see your computer screen here, but there's nothing there.
Right.
But you would be able to see it, it places it, or your keyboard would be in front of you, just be
I have no
touch the
desire to.
Wow.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's it's strange to think where we might be in like 20, 30 years. Oh man. All right. Well, speaking actually, this kind of is related to that in a way. There is no free will.
Sorry.
All right. So.
How do you feel about that one?
All right. So this one's you got to think about what they're trying to do when they're saying this. If someone says there is no free will, what are they trying to do?
They're trying to
Get out of
They're trying not
free
to,
will?
trying
Right.
not to take any
So
responsibility.
somebody made you say that statement, is what you're saying.
That everything's
That it was
If you have
okay.
no free will, then somebody.
That's actually I think the opposite direction
the
that I was.
opposite.
No. That's interesting though. Man, I love like hearing like you guys like say things. It's just from a completely different angle than I would have taken it.
but you're right. Like so who made you say that?
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. It would have been predetermined that.
That's what I mean. And just stop talking. Like, if there's no free will, then we're done. We're out.
Yes. That's now.
Why try?
Right. And I guess like the why try could be a form of the Columbo number 3, right? Where you're just kind of showing that if there really is no free will, then there's no point in anything, and why are we bothering even having this conversation? In fact, what is this conversation? This is all just like predetermined stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah. So when someone says that, does Evan have something?
Oh, he wants to know what tainted means.
Oh.
It means polluted.
Yeah.
Or muddied.
Yeah.
I had to define that word this week too.
Oh, that's weird.
But would one of the kids ask you that one?
Yeah, I guess somebody asked me that word definition this week too.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
I'm trying to think of what it was about.
There are no coincidences,
It must be
Carolyn. There
important for
must,
some
there must be a reason,
reason.
yes.
Unless it all doesn't matter.
So what they're trying to do when they say there is no free will is that they're trying to have you use your ability to make decisions to come to a conclusion on that. Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it?
Doesn't
Right.
matter if I don't have free will.
Right. And that's like, that would be the question is, yeah, if there is no free will, then why would you even bother asking me? Because the whole premise of that question is that I can use my decision-making capabilities to either agree with you or not agree with you, right? So, which you guys kind of got that. So the second one really isn't so much of a suicide statement as is just a plain old incoherent statement. Can anyone see if they can get that one?
Evan, did you read it? What do you think? What would you say if somebody said that to you? What would you say if somebody said that to you? What would be your comeback?
So, what's that?
No.
No. There you go. Just no.
Define the term. Define lift.
Okay.
Because I don't know that God really has.
Just pushing it up.
Like arms.
Yeah, or like, just using his power to raise it up, I guess.
I have to say no, and why are you asking?
Yeah.
What is that? What?
Where are you going with that?
Right.
I mean, no offense, Evan, but I feel like this is a good kid question. Like, kids like to ask this kind
Yeah.
of God make a rock so big. Kids love to ask that question.
This type of question.
So,
You know everything.
Yeah.
Do you believe? Yeah.
so what this is kind of like is it's like me saying, can Ryan be stronger than Ryan?
Yeah.
That's essentially what it's
Yeah,
saying.
you can.
No, I'm agreeing with Mike.
Yeah.
Because he can make the
God
rock,
be-
so therefore he has some
Right.
kind of power.
Yeah, so when you're making a comparison statement, you always need two different subjects. Even if it's just one person, I'm
But
comparing my
God
right
and
arm
he
to my left arm.
Are the same.
They're the same. But we're comparing his power to his power. Is God so powerful that his power cannot overcome it? Basically,
Oh.
is what's
Okay. That makes sense.
so it's just kind of this circular-ish statement that really just doesn't make any sense. And so, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's if I missed anything there, but that's basically where you would go with that one. Yeah, what this is really trying, I think the goal of this is to try to show that there's some limits to God's power. Like, oh well, God's not that powerful. He can't lift a rock so big that he created or whatever, which doesn't make any sense. But they're trying to show that there's limits to God's power. And we've already kind of established earlier in the class. Remember, Ryan, you actually gave an example last week or the week before. What's a limit to God? What can't God do? Evil, sin, yeah, like lying, right? He can't do any of that stuff. So it's not the Christian's conviction isn't that there aren't limits to God's power. It's that God is an orderly being that does have omnipotence. He has all power, but that doesn't mean that he can make contradictions come true. Is basically. And then last one: all thoughts are tainted. You want to try that one, Evan? Yeah, there we go. Perfect question. So if anyone asks you, are all thoughts tainted? Or if anyone says all thoughts are tainted, you just ask that. Is that going to work? Good. All right. So yeah, of course, the person is assuming that their thought isn't tainted, and so you just ask that question, and it blows up. Okay. Sibling rivalry. Okay, so sibling rivalry is kind of a variation or a type of suicide statement. It's a pair of objections that are logically inconsistent with each other. So they're saying one thing, and then they have this other belief that's riding with it that just doesn't work, and they're kind of competing against each other. It doesn't mean that both objections are false, but it does cut your task in half, right? And so they could say one of them could be true, but they can't both be true at the same time. And so you just want to be alert when these things come up. So I'm going to kind of show you a little dialogue and see if you can kind of see how it's sibling rivalry. So. So what's going on here is that, so what's one of the premises?
Good people go to heaven.
Good, yeah, that's the first one. And then what's the competing premise?
Good and bad are relative.
Right. So they both can't be true at the same time. Either there's absolute truth, or there is objective good and evil, or there is relative good and evil, and there is no absolute truth. And that's kind of what that last question there was showing. If goodness is relative, then how do you assume that Gandhi is good, i.e. there's objective morality and should be in heaven, right? And so one of those is true, right? I think Christians, we believe that there's an objective morality. So this doesn't undermine objective morality, but it does undermine that all truth is relative, or that morality itself is relative, right? And that's kind of what we want to harp on. Pop quiz. Don't worry, I'm not grading it. Okay. The suicide tactic uses the tendency of many points of view to blank when given the opportunity. What happens to suicide statements when we kind of show that they're
They
implode, right? Yeah, they self-destruct, right? The 2 steps to recognize a point that commits suicide are first, pay attention to the basic premise. Good. Second, determine if the claim satisfies its own
Premise or claim.
Pretty much, like requirements or standard or something like that. Good. A sibling rivalry is a pair of objections that are logically blank with each other. Thus, you can blank at least one.
Connected with each other?
Incompatible.
Incompatibles.
Oh,
yeah. Yep. And thus you can what?
Refute at least one of them.
Yeah, good. Yeah, refute, eliminate, whatever. Yeah, those are good. All right, and that's it for that one. And